My name is Dr. Rachel Whitaker. I'm 34 years old, and the night I was rolled into emergency surgery was the night I finally understood that the people I had been calling family did not love me the way I had spent years loving them. I was in the back of an ambulance, half curled against a stretcher rail, trying not to black out while a paramedic pressed gauze against my abdomen. The ceiling lights above me kept breaking into red flashes every time the siren bounced off traffic. My phone screen was cracked. My fingers were slippery. I could barely keep it in my hand. I called my father anyway. He answered on the fourth ring with music in the background. "Rachel, we're on our way out. What is it?" His voice had that impatient edge I knew too well, the one that always made me feel like I was interrupting something more important. "I've been in an accident," I said. Even speaking felt wrong, like my body was working against me. "I'm going into surgery. I need you and Mom to go to my apartment." "Just a few hours, please. The twins are there and the sitter leaves at 8. There was a pause. Not concern. Not panic, just a pause. Then muffled voices, like he'd already moved the phone away from his mouth. I heard my mother in the background. Sharp, annoyed. I heard laughter too, Emily's. Then the line went dead. For 1 second, I thought the call had dropped. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to reconnect. Instead, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat. From my mother. "Rachel, you've always been dramatic. We have concert tickets tonight. Figure something out." Then another from my father. "You work in hospitals. You know how these things go. Stop overreacting." And then Emily reacted to both with a laughing emoji. That tiny, stupid symbol hurt more than either message. Not because it was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me, because it was so casual, like my pain was familiar, predictable. Like I was still the family inconvenience they all expected me to clean up myself. One of the doctors leaning over me noticed my face change. Liam Carter. We worked in the same hospital, though in that moment, he didn't feel like a colleague. He felt like the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly tilted. "What happened?" he asked. I looked at him, then at the phone still shaking in my hand. "My parents," I said, and that was all I could manage. He didn't ask again. He just took one look at me and understood enough. What happened after that would change everything. Not right there in the ambulance. Not all at once. But something broke open that night, and once it did, nothing in my life could be put back the way it had been. But to understand why those messages landed the way they did, you have to understand this wasn't one cruel moment out of nowhere. It was the moment I stopped translating years of neglect into something I could still call love. For most of my adult life, I had been the reliable one. The one who answered. The one who stayed calm. The one people called when something went wrong, usually after they had already exhausted easier options. By 34, I was a cardiology resident in Denver, a single mother of 3-year-old twins, and the kind of woman who could manage a double shift, feverish toddlers, and a broken dishwasher without asking anyone for help unless there was truly no other option. Not because I was unusually strong, because I had learned early that depending on other people usually came with a price. Olivia and Noah were my whole world. They were 3, close enough in age to move like a unit, and different enough in personality to turn every bedtime into a negotiation. Olivia liked routine and noticed everything. Noah could fall asleep mid-sentence with one hand still gripping my sleeve. Their father had been out of the picture long enough that his absence had become background noise. So I built a life that ran on schedules, backup plans, and exhaustion. And still, somehow, I made room for my family. I sent money when my parents were in a tight month. I covered bills that were supposed to be temporary. I listened to my mother cry over expenses she somehow never mentioned until they were already urgent. I helped Emily when another one of her ideas collapsed, and everyone acted like encouragement meant writing a check. I did these things quietly, efficiently. Usually late at night after the twins were asleep and the apartment was finally still. I never made speeches about sacrifice. I never kept score out loud. I told myself that was what love looked like when you were the capable one. You gave more. You carried more. You didn't complain. If my father called stressed, I solved the problem. If my mother hinted, I understood the hint. If Emily needed rescuing, I stepped in before things became embarrassing. That had become my role, so gradually, I didn't even know when it started. I only knew I was good at holding things together, and once a family gets used to that, they stop seeing it as generosity. They start seeing it as your job. The ambulance hit a pothole, and pain tore through my side so sharply I had to bite down to keep from crying out. A paramedic said my name again, firm but calm, asking me to stay with her. I tried, I really did. But my mind had already left the stretcher. It was at my apartment, at 7:11 p.m., at the clock above my stove, at the babysitter glancing at the time and gathering her things, at Olivia asking where I was, at Noah getting tired and whiny in that soft way he did when he was trying not to cry. That was the worst part. Not the blood. Not the surgery. Not even the messages. It was knowing my children needed someone, and the people I had spent years showing up for still chose a concert over 2 small children whose mother might not make it through the night. Liam handed me his phone before I even asked, and in that moment, I stopped waiting for my family to become the people I had always pretended they were. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last night I would ever beg them for anything. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last night I would ever beg them for anything. When I opened my eyes again, the world had narrowed to sound before anything else. A steady monitor, soft footsteps, the faint rustle of fabric. For a few seconds, I stayed completely still, caught in that strange place between sleep and pain, not yet ready to remember why my body felt heavy and wrong. Then it came back all at once. The crash, the ambulance, the messages, my children. I turned my head too fast and instantly regretted it. Pain pulled low across my abdomen, hot and deep, enough to make my breath catch. A nurse appeared beside me almost immediately. "Easy," she said. "Don't try to move too quickly." My throat felt scraped raw. "My kids." That was all I could get out. Her expression softened. "They're safe." I closed my eyes. She adjusted something on the monitor and went on, calm and practical in the way hospital staff learn to be when someone is hanging on every word. The emergency childcare service confirmed placement. Someone stayed with them overnight. Everything is handled. A pressure I hadn't even realized I was still holding, released so suddenly it almost hurt. I sank back into the pillow and stared at the ceiling. Safe, not with family. Not because anyone who was supposed to care had shown up. Safe because strangers had done what my own parents would not. That truth sat beside the bed with me before anyone else did. The next few days blurred at the edges. Recovery has its own strange rhythm. Vitals, medications, interrupted sleep. Questions you answer without thinking. Pain that comes in waves and then, just when you think you're adjusting to it, shifts into a new shape. I hated being a patient. I hated the gown, the dependency, the way people lowered their voices around me. At work, I was the one moving quickly down hallways, reading charts, making decisions. Here I was flat on my back, being told when to sip water and when not to stand up alone. Liam came by the day after surgery. He leaned against the doorframe first, holding a paper cup of coffee, like he wasn't sure whether he was intruding. "You look terrible," he said. I gave him a dry look. That's a very comforting thing to say to a recovering surgical patient. He stepped farther into the room, almost smiling. "I figured you'd prefer honesty." He set the coffee down on the tray table, though neither of us pretended hospital coffee counted as kindness. It was the visit that mattered. The fact that he came after his shift. The fact that he didn't act like it was a burden. "You scared people," he said. "Occupational hazard." He pulled up a chair, then hesitated. "Has anybody come by?" I knew what he meant. Not coworkers, not the department. Family. I looked toward the window instead of at him. "No." He was quiet for a second. Then he just nodded once, like he understood that anything he said after that would either sound too kind or not kind enough. That silence helped more than sympathy would have. By the third day, I stopped checking my phone for missed calls that weren't there. At first, I kept thinking maybe I'd wake up to some kind of message that would at least attempt concern. A simple, "Are you okay? We were scared. Let us know what you need." Nothing, no apology, no follow-up. Not even the shallow kind of outreach people do for appearances. The empty screen started to feel less shocking and more like evidence. Lying there with nowhere to go and nothing to distract me, old memories began rearranging themselves. Things I had once filed away as temporary problems or family rough patches started looking different, sharper, less innocent. My father talking about the house like it was one bad month away from disaster. My mother calling in a soft, tired voice to explain some expense had popped up unexpectedly. Emily needing just a little help to get something off the ground. Every time I stepped in before the panic became real, I told myself that was what decent people did, what daughters did, what family was. On the fourth morning, I asked the nurse for my laptop. She gave me a look over the top of my chart. "You're supposed to be resting." "I know," I said. "I just need to deal with something." That part was true, though it still surprised me how calm I sounded. Once the screen came to life, the banking app opened before I had time to second-guess myself. It was all there exactly the way I already knew it would be. Rows of payments, repeating amounts, predictable dates. Quiet patterns that had become so normal, I'd stopped seeing how abnormal they were. Mortgage, insurance, transfers, random expenses tucked between them. I kept scrolling. Back through months I barely remembered living. Through residency, through pregnancy, through the first brutal year with newborn twins when I was more tired than I thought a person could survive, and still somehow the payments kept going out on time. I sat there staring at it, one hand resting lightly over the hospital blanket, and felt something cold settle inside me. I had built an entire emotional system around the idea that I was helping. Helping meant optional. Helping meant temporary. Helping meant generous. But this was maintenance. This was structural. This was me keeping their life upright while telling myself I was only stepping in now and then. My cursor hovered over the first automatic payment. For a moment, the old voice rose up exactly on cue. "Don't do this. They need you. This will make you the selfish one. This is cruel. This is punishment." Then another image pushed through harder than all of it. That group chat. That laughing emoji. Concert tickets. My kids. A stranger sitting in my apartment because the people I had spent years supporting didn't want their night interrupted. I clicked cancel. A small box popped up asking me to confirm. I didn't hesitate. One payment disappeared. Then another. Then another. I went down the list slowly, methodically, removing them one by one. It didn't feel dramatic. That was the strange part. No shaking hands. No grand speech to the empty room. Just a series of quiet decisions that should have been made long ago. When I finished, the page looked different, cleaner somehow. Then I opened my contacts. I stared at my father's name first. There should have been more emotion there than there was. Rage, maybe. Grief. Something cinematic. Instead, I felt tired, deeply tired. I blocked him. Then my mother. Then Emily. That one took a second longer. Not because she had earned it. Because once, before adulthood hardened everything into roles and expectations, she had been my little sister. There had been years of shared rooms and whispered jokes and borrowed clothes and late-night conversations that had felt real at the time. Then I saw that emoji again in my mind and pressed block. When the laptop clicked shut, the room felt different. Not happier, not healed. Lighter. Liam walked in maybe 10 minutes later, stopping short when he looked at me. "What happened?" he asked. I looked out toward the late sunlight spreading gold over the city beyond the window. Denver looked peaceful from up there. Mountains in the distance. buildings catching the light, a whole world moving normally while mine had shifted its axis. I think, I said slowly, I finally stopped taking responsibility for things that were never mine. He didn't ask me to explain it. He didn't need to. By the time I was discharged, my body still hurt, but the panic inside me had gone strangely quiet. Home should have felt ordinary. Same hallway, same key in the same lock, same toys half under the couch. But I walked toward my apartment like I was arriving to a life I had stepped out of and now had to learn how to see clearly. The nanny opened the door before I could knock. "They've been waiting at the window," she said with a smile. A second later, Olivia appeared, then stopped herself at the last moment, remembering whatever careful instructions she'd been given about not jumping on me. Her little face tightened. "You have an OE." "I know," I said, lowering myself carefully. "But I'm home." Noah was less restrained. He wrapped himself around my leg and declared with complete seriousness, "You took too long." That almost broke me. The nanny gave me a quick update before leaving. Meals, naps, a minor argument over crayons, bedtime mostly under control, nothing dramatic, thing. Everything exactly the way it should have been. She spoke professionally, but there was warmth in it too, the kind that comes from someone who had simply decided my children mattered. After she left, the apartment settled into evening. Small shoes by the couch, a coloring book open on the table, a cup with one sip of juice still in it. My life. My real life. The one I had been funding, protecting, and stretching myself thin for while also carrying people who would not have done the same for me. That night, after both kids were finally asleep and I was alone at the kitchen table with tea going cold beside my hand, I opened a drawer looking for pain medication. Instead, I found the binder. I had almost forgotten about it. Thick, worn at the corners. Full of years I had organized into columns and notes because I told myself being precise made it temporary. Manageable, accountable. I opened it, page after page, dates. Amounts, notes to myself scribbled during exhausted nights. This month only. Short-term support. Bridge until they recover. I turned pages faster. At the back was the total. I stared at it for a long time before my brain let it become real. $381,000. Not support. Not help. Not occasional generosity. Sustaining them. A knock sounded at the door. 3 measured taps. Calm, deliberate. Every muscle in my body tightened. For one brief second, I thought, they came. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my parents standing there. It was my grandfather. And the look in his eyes told me he already knew far more than I had ever said out loud. My grandfather stood in the hallway like he had stepped out of another time. Tall, straight-backed despite his age, silver hair combed neatly as always. He wore the same calm expression I remembered from childhood, the one that made people lower their voices around him without knowing why. "Rachel," he said gently. For a moment, I just stared at him. I hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years. Not because of any argument between us, but because somewhere along the way, my parents had started quietly controlling when families saw each other. Visits turned into excuses. Calls turned into another time. Now he was standing in my doorway like none of that mattered. "Grandpa," I said finally. He stepped forward and hugged me carefully, one hand steady against my back as if he could feel exactly where the stitches were. "You look like you've been through something," he said quietly. That's one way to describe it. He studied my face for a second longer, eyes sharp in that way they always were. 40 years as a federal judge had trained him to read people before they spoke. Then Olivia and Noah crashed into the moment. "Great, Grandpa!" They wrapped themselves around his legs instantly, dragging him toward the living room like they'd known him their whole lives, instead of seeing him only a handful of times. His face softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Well," he said, crouching slowly, "I see I've been replaced by a welcoming committee." They immediately began showing him toys, drawings, and the complicated logic of a half-built block tower. For a minute, I just watched. The apartment felt different with him in it. Quieter, somehow. Like the air had steadied. Eventually, he straightened and looked toward the kitchen table. His gaze landed on the open binder. He didn't touch it yet. "How long?" he asked. I knew exactly what he meant. 8 years. He nodded once, slowly. "And you kept records?" I gestured toward the binder. "Everything." He walked over and sat down the way he used to at the end of long dinners. Hands folded, posture relaxed, but attentive. When he opened the binder, he didn't rush. Page by page, he looked through it, his expression never changing, though once or twice his eyebrows lifted slightly at certain numbers. The twins kept playing in the living room, their voices floating in and out like background music. Finally, he closed the binder and rested one hand on top of it. "That's substantial," he said. "That's one word for it." He leaned back in the chair and studied me again. "You never told anyone." "No." "Why?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because I thought it was temporary," I said. "Because I thought if I just helped long enough, things would stabilize." "And because you didn't want to embarrass them," he added quietly. I didn't answer. He smiled faintly. I've spent most of my life listening to people explain situations that look very different once the facts are laid out clearly. He tapped the binder lightly. "These are facts. I don't want to ruin anyone's life," I said. His expression changed slightly. "This isn't about ruin." "What is it about then?" "Truth," he said simply. We sat there for a moment in silence. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "My 70th birthday is next week." I nodded slowly. "I heard. The whole family will be there." I knew where this was going before he said it. "Grandpa?" He raised a hand gently. "Rachel, you have carried a narrative that protects everyone except you. I'm not interested in revenge." "I know." His voice stayed calm. "That's exactly why you're the right person to tell the truth." Across the room, Noah knocked the block tower over, and Olivia announced this was definitely not part of the plan. Their argument lasted exactly 6 seconds before dissolving into laughter. Grandpa watched them for a moment. "Children have a remarkable ability to see things clearly," he said. "Adults complicate everything." He stood up slowly and placed the binder back in front of me. "Bring it to the party." I stared at it. "Do you understand what that will do?" "Yes. I don't want a scene." "You won't have to create one." He walked to the door, then paused. "Reality tends to do that on its own." After he left, the apartment felt strangely heavy. Not tense, just full of anticipation. Like the quiet air before a thunderstorm you know is coming, whether you're ready or not. Rain started tapping against the windows later that night. The twins fell asleep early, worn out from the excitement of their unexpected visitor. I sat at the kitchen table with the binder open again, staring at pages that suddenly looked different now that someone else had seen them. For years, those numbers had lived in silence. Private proof that I wasn't imagining how much I had been carrying. Now they were about to become public. That thought made my stomach twist. Still, once I started organizing everything properly, I didn't stop. Bank statements downloaded, dates sorted, notes rewritten into timelines that anyone could follow. It felt oddly familiar, almost clinical. The same focus I used preparing patient files before presenting complicated cases during residency. Except this time, the case study was my own life. Every entry pulled a memory with it. The winter I paid for furnace repairs while studying for board exams with newborn twins asleep beside me. The month I postponed fixing my car because my father's insurance had lapsed. The year Emily launched yet another business idea that was described as family support when I funded it. Around midnight, I leaned back in my chair. At the bottom of the document, the total sat quietly again. $381,000. I had looked at it earlier. Now it felt heavier. My phone vibrated suddenly against the table. Unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. "Hello, Rachel." My mother's voice came through sharp and irritated. "Why have you been avoiding us?" No hello, no are you okay, just accusation. How did you get this number? I asked. That's not important, she snapped. Your father checked the bank account today. The payment stopped. There it was. Not worry, money. That wasn't a mistake, I said. Silence. Then my father's voice joined the call. You canceled it? Yes. Rachel, the mortgage is due next week. I'm aware. You can't just cut us off like that, he said. We depend on that. The words landed harder than anything else. Depend. I looked at the binder. 8 years of quiet support reduced to an expectation. I just had emergency surgery, I said slowly. Did either of you know that? There was a brief pause. Then my mother sighed. You said you were fine. I didn't say that. Well, you always handle things, she replied impatiently. Something inside me shifted then. Not anger, recognition. I almost died, I said. Neither of them responded to that. My father continued like we were discussing a billing error. This isn't the time for drama. We'll talk about feelings later. Right now, we need to figure out the payment situation. I stared at the phone. 8 years. And the only crisis they could hear was the mortgage. There's nothing to figure out, I said quietly. What does that mean? It means I'm not sending money anymore. My mother's voice shot up immediately. After everything we've done for you. For a split second, the old guilt tried to rise, the familiar reflex. Then the memory of the ambulance returned, the flashing lights, the messages. Emily's laughing emoji. I have to go, I said. Rachel. I ended the call. My hands were shaking slightly when I set the phone down. Not from fear. From relief. I walked down the hallway and looked in on the twins. They were asleep, sprawled across their blankets in the careless way only children sleep, completely trusting the world to hold together while they rested. That trust grounded me. The next morning, a message arrived from a cousin I rarely spoke to. Just a heads up, it read. Emily's been telling people you're unstable since the accident. I stared at the screen. So that was the plan. If I spoke first, I would already sound unreliable. For years, I had kept quiet to keep peace. Now, silence itself was the lie. I closed the binder and slid it into my bag. Grandpa's birthday party was only a few days away. And for the first time, I realized the hardest part wouldn't be telling the truth. It would be standing still while everyone finally saw it. The night of the party arrived faster than I expected. Grandpa's house sat at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, overlooking the foothills, glowing warmly in the evening light. I turned off the car engine but stayed in the driver's seat. The folder rested on the passenger seat beside me. 8 years of silence inside it. Behind me, Olivia leaned forward from the back seat. Will there be balloons? It's a birthday party, I said softly. So, probably. Noah nodded seriously. Then there has to be cake. I smiled faintly. I wished life were still that simple. Inside, the house buzzed with conversation and music. Relatives filled the living room, glasses clinking, people laughing the way families do when they think everything is normal. Then people noticed me. The room shifted. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Grandpa crossed the room first and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You ready? He asked quietly. No, I admitted. He smiled slightly. That usually means it matters. Across the room I saw them, my parents, perfectly composed near the fireplace. Emily beside them. For a moment it looked exactly the way it always had. Then they saw me. My mother's smile froze. My father stiffened. Emily recovered first, gliding over like nothing had happened. Rachel, she said brightly, kissing the air beside my cheek. You look better. Do I? I asked. We were worried, she said smoothly. I met her eyes. Were you? Her smile flickered. Mom approached next, hugging me carefully, more for the room than for me. We've been trying to reach you. I've been recovering, I said. Dad nodded stiffly. We'll talk later. Not, how are you? Not, we're glad you're alive. Just later. I moved toward the refreshment table, breathing slowly. Behind me, Emily's voice carried just loud enough. I'm honestly concerned, she told a group of cousins. The accident really affected Rachel emotionally. Soft murmurs followed. Aunt Linda appeared beside me. They've been calling people all week, she whispered, trying to make you sound unstable. I watched Olivia carefully pour juice into a cup, like the room wasn't slowly tightening around us. I'm not here to fight, I said. Linda shook her head. You're here to stop pretending. Across the room, Grandpa raised his glass. The room gradually quieted. Music faded. Every conversation slowed. And suddenly the house was so silent you could hear the air vent humming. Grandpa cleared his throat. Before we continue celebrating, he said calmly, there are a few things our family needs to hear. Every eye turned toward him. And for the first time that night, I realized something surprising. I wasn't afraid anymore. The room went still the moment my grandfather finished speaking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Decades of courtroom authority had trained people to listen. The second his tone shifted from casual to deliberate. My father tried to interrupt. Dad, maybe we should... Grandpa lifted one hand slightly. This won't take long. Something about the way he said it shut the room down completely. Before he could continue, my mother stepped forward quickly, her expression softening into something fragile and carefully performed. Actually, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere, there's something we should talk about first. I felt the move before she finished the sentence. She was getting ahead of it. Rachel has been through a very emotional time since the accident, my mother continued gently, glancing around the room like she was sharing a private concern. She cut contact with us completely, and we're honestly worried. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father nodded gravely. She's been saying things that aren't accurate. Emily stepped closer to them, resting a supportive hand on our mother's shoulder. We just want her to get help, she added quietly. Concerned eyes turned toward me. For years, that tactic would have worked. I would have rushed to smooth everything over just to end the tension. Tonight, I didn't move. My grandfather turned his head slowly toward them. Are you finished? He asked. My father hesitated. We're just trying to protect our daughter. Grandpa nodded once. Then clarity should help everyone. He reached into his jacket and removed a thick folder. My folder. A ripple moved through the room as he opened it. I spent 40 years listening to competing versions of events, he said calmly. Facts tend to simplify those situations. My father shifted uncomfortably. Dad, this really isn't necessary. Oh, Grandpa said mildly. I believe it is. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at my father. Daniel, who has been paying the mortgage on your house for the past 8 years? The question landed like glass breaking. My father blinked. We handle our own finances. Grandpa lifted a document. According to these records, Rachel has transferred roughly $2,400 every month to your mortgage company for 96 consecutive months. A sharp gasp moved through the room. My mother's face went pale. That's a misunderstanding, she said quickly. No, Grandpa replied. It's arithmetic. He turned another page. Health insurance premiums after Daniel lost employer coverage. $800 monthly. Paid by Rachel. Another page. Vehicle repairs, household expenses, financial support for Emily's various business ventures. The air grew heavier with every line he read. Emily stepped forward, defensive now. She offered to help. Nobody forced her. Grandpa looked at her calmly. No one suggested force, he said. We are discussing gratitude. Silence answered him. Then he closed the folder briefly. In total, he continued, Rachel has contributed approximately $381,000 to support this household. Someone whispered, That can't be right. My father's jaw tightened. Families help each other. Yes, Grandpa said evenly. They do. Then he reached into his pocket and took out his phone. 2 months ago, he said, Rachel was transported to emergency surgery following a severe accident. The room went completely quiet. She called her parents to watch her children. My heart started pounding again. Grandpa looked down at the screen. I will now read the response she received. He read the message word for word. When he finished, a wave of shocked murmurs rolled through the crowd. "That's out of context," Emily said quickly. Grandpa lowered the phone. "Context," he said quietly, "would include calling back, visiting the hospital, showing concern." He looked around the room. There was none. People began shifting away from my parents almost instinctively. For the first time that night, my father looked uncertain. Then Grandpa turned toward me. "Rachel," he said gently. Every eye in the room followed his gaze. "Would you like to say anything?" After that night, the silence inside the family changed shape. It was no longer the old silence, the one built on politeness and avoidance, and whatever version of me my parents had been handing out to other people for years. This one felt stripped down, honest, a little awkward, but real. Messages started coming in from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. "I'm sorry. We didn't know. If you ever need help with the twins, call me." A cousin offered to babysit. An aunt asked if I wanted company for dinner sometime. Even the family group chat, the same place where I had once been dismissed so casually, went quiet. A few days later, it vanished entirely. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. 3 weeks after Grandpa's birthday, Aunt Linda called. I was standing at the kitchen sink, watching Olivia and Noah run through the grass outside my apartment window, both of them wearing rain boots for no reason except that they liked how loud they sounded on concrete. "They're selling the house," she said. I turned from the window. "What?" "Your parents. They can't keep it?" For a moment, I didn't say anything. I had imagined anger, vindication, some ugly satisfaction I would be ashamed of later. Instead, I just felt tired. "Where are they going?" "Mark is letting them stay in the guest house," she said. "But he made it clear it's temporary. Your father's working now. Your mother, too." Working. The word landed strangely. After we hung up, I opened my banking app and stared at the money that no longer disappeared every month. For years, it had left my account so automatically it barely felt real. Now, it just sat there. I created a new account, Olivia and Noah Future Fund. Then I transferred the first deposit. The confirmation screen appeared, simple and unemotional, but something inside me settled when I saw it. That money was no longer keeping a lie alive. It was building something clean. The change in my life after that wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. Mornings felt less tight. Grocery shopping didn't come with a second layer of panic. I could sign school forms, buy winter clothes, replace things around the apartment without mentally bracing for the next emergency call from someone older than me who still expected rescuing. 3 months after the party, Aunt Linda called again. I was folding laundry at the table. "You should probably hear this from family," she said carefully. "Emily's having a hard time." I sat down. "What happened?" "She lost a major partnership. People heard about what happened at the party. Some of it spread. Investors backed off." I looked down at one of Noah's tiny socks in my hand. "And Dad?" "He's working at a hardware store," she said. "Emily's waitressing part-time." After the call, I stood in the living room and watched the twins build a blanket fort out of couch cushions and complete confidence. Their laughter echoed off the walls. They were happy. Safe. Unaware of how much had changed, because children don't measure peace the way adults do. They just live inside it. That evening, while I was helping them brush their teeth and negotiate whose stuffed animal got the good pillow, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those now. This time, I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then Emily said quietly, "Please don't hang up." I sat on the edge of my bed. "I'm listening." Her voice sounded different. Smaller, not polished, not bright. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one." I didn't interrupt. "When Grandpa read everything out loud, I still told myself you were exaggerating," she admitted. "I wanted to believe that." Then Mom showed me the statements after everything started falling apart. I stared at the floor. "I never asked where the money came from," she whispered. "No," I said. "You didn't." A long silence followed. Then she said the one thing I hadn't expected. I laughed at that message. I keep thinking about it. I can't stop. My chest tightened, but not in the old way. "People usually don't question a system that benefits them," I said. "I know," she whispered. "I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What you were carrying. What we let happen." Outside my window, the evening had turned blue and still. "Then start there," I said softly. "Do something different with that. I'm trying." Another pause. Then, fragile and almost embarrassed, she said, "I miss having a sister." I closed my eyes for a second. "I never stopped being your sister," I said. "I just stopped being responsible for everyone." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Not healed, not ready to call it forgiveness. But the future no longer felt locked into the past. And sometimes that's where real change begins. The night I was lying in the ambulance, I realized something that took me 34 years to understand. I had spent most of my life believing that loyalty meant endurance, that if you gave enough, helped enough, sacrificed enough, eventually love would balance itself out. I was wrong. 1 year later, that realization still echoes in my mind sometimes, but it no longer hurts the way it used to. Because life looks very different now. On Saturday mornings, Olivia and Noah wake up earlier than I'd prefer and race into the living room like they're competing in an Olympic event that only children understand. One of them always builds a blanket fort. The other insists it needs defense walls. Their arguments about secret passwords usually end with both of them laughing too hard to remember what they were arguing about. The apartment isn't big. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, toys that somehow multiply overnight. But it's quiet in the way a home should be. Peaceful. On Sundays, my grandfather still visits. He knocks the same way every time. 3 steady taps. Olivia runs to the door before I can reach it, and Noah always asks the same question. "Did you bring a story?" Grandpa usually answers with a smile. "I brought 3. Then they drag him to the couch while he tells them stories about courtrooms and strange cases from decades ago, carefully edited into versions suitable for 6-year-old attention spans. Sometimes I stand in the kitchen and watch them while I make coffee. Not because I'm worried about what will happen next, because nothing dramatic is happening anymore. And that feels like a miracle. My parents are still rebuilding their lives across town. My father works steady hours now. My mother helps with bookkeeping at a church nearby. We haven't had a long conversation yet, and surprisingly, the silence between us no longer feels heavy. It simply exists. Emily and I speak occasionally. Short messages, honest ones, no expectations, no pretending. Some relationships take distance before they can become real. After the twins fall asleep each night, I still sit at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The budgeting app shows the college fund growing slowly, month after month. The same money that once disappeared into obligation now builds something that belongs to my children. That small shift changed everything. Because the truth I learned through all of this is simpler than I expected. Real love doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand sacrifice as proof. And it never asks you to lose yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Sometimes protecting your life is the most loyal thing you can do, for yourself and for the people who truly depend on you. When I walk down the hallway at night and look in on Olivia and Noah sleeping, their future feels open in a way mine never did growing up. Not because life became perfect, because I finally stopped carrying things that were never mine. For 34 years, I believed loyalty meant endurance. Now I know something better. Loyalty also means protecting your own life. If you've ever had to choose yourself after years of choosing everyone else, you probably understand how quiet that freedom feels. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your experience or leave a comment below.